Welcome to a brand new episode of the Making Waves podcast. My name is Giancarlo Nadeau, and joining me now is an individual that has become very well known on the Sunshine Coast. He began his teaching career in the 1970s, and he's a big reason why there is hockey here in our wonderful community. Jim Gray joining me. Jim, thanks for doing this. How's it going?
It's going great, Giancarlo. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, it's such an exciting time, and I really do appreciate you joining me today. Let's talk about this game that's coming up on Saturday. Of course, this year, the 50th anniversary of hockey on the Sunshine Coast. This Saturday, the Tsunami hosting Abbotsford. It's a time for the community to come together and really, recognize and cheer on all those people for making hockey what it is. So, how excited are you for the weekend?
Yeah, it's good. I'm looking forward to it. Actually, I haven't had the opportunity to see any of the Tsunami games as of yet. I've got a grandson that plays in the men's commercial league, and he's been playing senior hockey with the Powell River Regals. So I've been kind of traveling around and watching his games just because I've supported him since he was a little guy on the coast here, right? Yeah, no, this will be a real treat to see what you and Brad and the other coaches have done with these young kids in our community. So yeah, I'm excited to see it.
Well, it certainly should be a great night, and I know a lot of work's been put into making it a great one. And we're going to talk more about the tsunami, Jim. But right now, let's jump back. Let's go back to the 1970s, before the tsunami were even a thought. How did hockey get here? I know there's a bunch of stories to be told about that.
Yeah, probably the history of hockey on the coast started actually in 1971 or 72. I can't remember which year it was, but there was a group of about six doctors in the Sunshine Coast Medical Clinic that really felt that Seashell deserved a complex very similar to what Powell River had. They had a swimming complex, they had two ice rinks, and they had a curling rink attached to it. They had a multi-purpose facility for their community that they built, and it was spectacular. And the doctors just felt like we had a senior population here, and the seniors just kept asking for a pool. And the only pool at the time was in Gibson's. There was no pool in Seashell, and of course, no ice rink. So the doctors got together and they decided that the only way to do this was to have a referendum on the whole coast. And so they they had this referendum and saying the regional district needed 60% of the population to agree to vote for this multi-purpose complex that was going to be built right beside the Roberts Creek Golf Course, Cliff Gilker Park, in fact. So that was the plan. And what ended up happening was, because the coast at the time was sort of we were kind of a summer resort place for Vancouver and the island. This is where their summer cottages were, right? And so a lot of those people felt that if they put up a multi-purpose complex at Roberts Creek, my taxes are going to go up ridiculous amount, right? And they didn't want that. So as it turned out, there were some business people in the community that ended up busing the Vancouver residents over to vote no for this multiplex hockey arena and curling arena and swimming pool. So anyways, the votes were cast and it came in at 58.2%. No recreation complex at Roberts Creek. I mean, Roberts Creek would have been the perfect place for it because it was close to Pender Harbor, close to Gibson's. It was in the middle of the coast. But anyways, that was a real serious disappointment to the people on the coast. But there was a group of serious curlers, older guys that had curled in different communities around. They got together and they decided, you know what, we need we need a complex. we may not be able to have a pool, but we could certainly put up a rink, and we could make the arena so that we could curl on it for a couple of days and then play hockey and figure skate and public skate for a couple of days. So that happened in 1973. What they did is they sold $200 debentures into the community. That would help with the startup cost of the arena that the Seashell district had sold to this group of guys for $1. So the Seashell Arena and that property that it's on was given to the district for $1, and then these debentures came in, and there were lots of people supporting the idea of a hockey rink or an ice surface, as it was. And I got involved. I got called in once they had drawn up plans. They drew up some plans. There was Hank Hall, Gordy Dixon, Walter Tripp was where we had the meeting at, and they asked me to come in and just to check over the plans to see what it looked like. And yeah, I was more than willing and more than glad to do that, because it seemed like these guys were keen to spearhead this and get this up and running. And sure enough, they did. In 1973, the plans were okay. They had enough startup money. Hank Hall was he was the president and owner of Whitehall Construction, and he'd built a couple of beautiful homes right along the waterfront. So he had his whole construction crew here, and it was nothing to throw up an old barn up in Seashell. And except for the dressing rooms, everything worked out perfectly. It was a real treat to the community. Once the ice went in, they were going to curl. I think it was on Sundays and Mondays, and then on Tuesdays they would transform the ice over into hockey and figure skating. So we had lots and lots of interest. There was kids. I think we said we had 400 kids that we registered in minor hockey from Port Mellon all the way to Pender Harbor. It was amazing. I think right now in minor hockey in Seashell, I think there's only about 200 that they have, right? But it took off, and like for 2 or 3 years, the numbers just kept growing, and yeah, that was kind of the start of it. Really, it was a multi-purpose rink. The curlers curled on it for a couple of years or a couple of days during the week, and then the figure skaters and the hockey guys played on it the rest of the week, right? But one of the neat things about this, and some of the old timers will remember, what they did was they had right about where the blue line would have been at the far end at that Seashell Arena, they built another board so that they had a little mini rink in the end. And so the curlers curled on 2/3 of the hockey rink, and then they had the boards. So we had practices on that mini. We called it the mini rink, right? So we could literally have a bunch of young kids playing and practicing while the curlers were curling, and then the first couple of years we were playing full contact hockey on the 2/3 of the rink, right? So if you can imagine, it got pretty hectic. It was pretty rock'em sock'em, to say the least. But they, in this community, they filled the arena every Friday and Saturday night to watch the commercial men play and the old timers play, and even the young kids playing. It was there was never a problem getting people to the rink. So that was the start. That was in 1973-74.
No, it's absolutely incredible to hear those stories. You did mention the locker rooms, though. I know you shared that story with me a few days ago. You got to share
Well,
that here, Jim.
this is, I'll tell you what, this is one of my highlight stories. So here I was with these curlers, these 3 curlers, and they pulled out the plans for the arena. So I had these plans in front of me and I went, oh man, 200 by 80 foot, a regulation size arena. That's awesome. And because lots of communities don't take full ice, right? I said, that's good. Yeah, three rows of bleachers on the one side. That's good. Benches over here, penalty box, good. A mezzanine, what a good idea that is. With a bar, a lounge. Well, people will be flocking to that lounge in the early days, and they were, and that was a really good idea. And an area above that you could host other kinds of events, right? Birthday parties and that sort of thing. Anyways, I started looking at the plans and I said, oh, you got a little coffee shop here. And as you walk in, that's good. And there's the skate shop. That's good. A little office. Yeah, for the ice guys. Okay. And here's the dressing rooms over here. There's dressing room 1. Yeah. And dressing room 2. And I said, so 2 dressing rooms, where are the other 2 dressing rooms? And the guy that had made the plans, he said, well, you've only got two teams on the ice at a time. You only need 2 dressing rooms. And I went, well, yeah, we'll wait. So what happens is 2 teams come to the rink, they each go into their dressing room, and then, in the next half hour, the next group of guys are going to come and they need some place to change. So they need a dressing room. And they said, so we need 4 dressing rooms? I went, yeah, you absolutely have to have 4. So he took his ruler, took his pencil, and he went over to the plans and he just drew a straight line through the 2. He says, okay, dressing room 1, dressing room 2, dressing room 3, and dressing room 4. And I looked at them and I couldn't see the measurements, but it seemed, well, it seems like a fair bit of space. And what did I know, right? I was just a school teacher. I can't remember the last time I'd taken any of, what do we call it in school, when you had to draw plans and whatnot? What's that?
Geometry.
Well, not geometry, but just even reading a plan
All
and
right.
yeah. So, anyways,
Architecture.
that's an architect. So anyways, I missed it. I didn't realize that once they cut those dressing rooms in half, the dressing rooms would be just laughable, and they really were. We hosted teams from Vancouver and the island, and people came over and they could not believe how small these dressing rooms were, and we were the laughing stock. In fact, I had to usually bring benches when we had old timers or commercial league tournaments. We had to bring benches from the school to put in the middle so that everybody could squeeze in. And I was just, but I think it was maybe 1970. I'm going to say 1976, 77. Some of the construction guys on the coast that were playing hockey realized that the dressing rooms were ridiculous and that they built two other dressing rooms. I think McDonald's sponsored one, and another organization sponsored one on the far side of the arena. So that really took the pressure off. And then they were able to kick out the wall and on the other 2 washrooms. But yeah, that was pretty hilarious. That was curlers building a hockey rink, and they weren't too with it when it came to what they needed. But we made it work.
No, for sure. And you obviously do come from a hockey background. You were with Nelson University. But when was the first time you remember stepping onto the ice and sort of playing hockey? Do you have any young memories?
Yeah, well, I grew up in North Vancouver, and when I was 12, my dad moved to Calgary. So I went to Calgary, and when I was, I guess, 11 or 12, and I lived in South Calgary, and I played two years of bantam in Calgary on outdoor rinks, and then I got asked to move up to the next age group, and then I started playing. Then I ended up playing junior B hockey in Calgary for the CFAC 960s, and started looking at sort of whether or not I could get a schooling paid for if I could get a scholarship, right? And so I started looking at universities. In the university, there was Boston University in the States. My dad felt like he didn't think that he wanted me to go that far. But one of the only schools in Canada at the time that was giving scholarships were Notre Dame University in Nelson. It was the first university in all of Canada that had that at the time they had the national ski team in Nelson along with the Nelson Maple Leafs. So I ended up going to Nelson and playing junior there and playing university hockey there and university soccer. But like I say, I guess I got grounded in Calgary. It was when you're in Calgary, I could walk out my backyard and go up to the South Calgary outdoor rink and play all day. And that was the best part about being on the prairies. Was it got cold enough you could take your Mars bar and your two hockey pucks and you could go out and play all day and all weekend if you wanted. So yeah, it was good. It was fun. And the kids on the coast here just never ever had that opportunity, right? It never ever got cold. I think maybe once or twice since I've lived here, Trout Lake has frozen over, and that's been the biggest treat we've ever had when one of the lakes up on the coast would freeze over and kids could go and river skate. But otherwise, there was too many kids that wanted to play and not enough ice time.
Exactly. And skating on those frozen ponds, certainly a lot of fun. And I'm sure you had a lot of fun with Nelson University. What was that experience like for you?
Well, yeah, I was so fortunate. I had one of my mentors who was the head of the PE department at Notre Dame, Ernie Gare. He had three sons that both played in the NHL. Danny Gare with the Buffalo Sabres, and his son Ernie Gare Jr. He coached and played in the interior, played for the Vernon Vipers. But Ernie literally dragged me through university. I was playing soccer and hockey, and I was skiing, and he kept my nose to the grindstone, and I left that university with a teaching certificate, and it was the best move I had ever made, right? I mean, I've been teaching on the coast here for 54 years, and I owe that to Ernie Gare, who was able to, we'd go on those long road trips, and it was pretty easy to sleep in on a Monday morning for your Monday morning class. But Ernie made sure that I was able to stick with it and get my degree and become a teacher in the province.
That's incredible. Can you try and paint a picture for what exactly the Sunshine Coast looked like 50 years ago?
Well, I think we've got maybe 30,000 residents on the coast right now,
Yeah.
and we've probably got 40,000 in the summer. Those are the people that come over from Vancouver, and they've got their summer cottages down Red Roofs Road. Well, when I was growing up in North Vancouver, my dad had just a little 22-foot clinker built boat, and he parked it in at not in Horseshoe Bay, in Fisherman's Cove, and we used to come up on the weekends to Gower Point, right at in Lower Gibsons, right. And my grandparents had a summer cottage, right? So I knew the area when I started putting out feelers as to where I'd like to start teaching in 1970. There was Penticton, there was Nelson, there was Seashell, because I knew the Sunshine Coast because of my grandparents' summer cottage, and as it turned out, I got invited to come and have an interview, and it was just at the time in the 1970s when the residential schools were moving their children from the residential schools into the public school system. So it was a different time, right? We had all the Seashelt native kids along with the residential school kids that were coming into Seashelt Elementary. That was where I was teaching. And there were only, I think there were four elementary schools on the coast. There was Davis Bay, there was Gibson's, Roberts Creek, and Seashell. And then the two high schools were Elphinstone and Pender Harbor. So really, there was only six schools on the coast, whereas now there's 13. Right? The traffic certainly wasn't any kind of an issue. The ferries, we had hourly ferry traffic, and the ferries were much smaller. Um, Again, really, the only sports that were being played were by the natives who were playing soccer. They had a soccer team that were playing in town. Um, but it wasn't until 1970 where a group of us guys that were kind of into PE started the kids basketball league, and then we started Leaf Mianis, who just recently passed away, another teacher. He started kids soccer, and then in '74 we had the arena, and minor hockey took place. But it was certainly a lot different than it is now. It's just even getting around on the coast. It seems like it's so much different, and we got a lot more schools too, right? There's Half Moon Bay, and there's Madeira Park, and then there's Cedar Grove was a new school. So the peninsula has certainly grown, and so has the number of people that we've got on the coast.
Well, we've got some new schools, but we've also got a new junior hockey team. How excited were you when you found out that junior hockey was coming to the coast?
Yeah, when Stuart, one of my old star pupils at Seashelt Elementary, he called me to let me know that they had applied to get into the Pacific Coast. It's not, no, it's what's
Pacific Junior Hockey League.
yeah, it's the Pacific Junior Hockey, right? The Pacific Junior Hockey, and I had been involved with two organizations. I think in 1978 to 1980, they took a lot of the guys in the commercial league and wanted to offer something a little bit more than just commercial hockey, where you had skill level from non-skaters all the way to guys that had played in Ontario or Alberta or play. So it was a real mix. So they put together kind of a group. They put together a group of guys and came up with a season, and they called it the Sunshine Coast Gales. And they had games with Seattle teams, Vancouver teams, senior teams, and they had a real vision for the coast, and it worked to a point because there was lots of support in the community in the early days. But then when teams all of a sudden, because there was really no commitment, you weren't in a league, right? It was a season of exhibition games. And if teams couldn't get enough guys to come over, then they didn't come over, and then you'd sold tickets to the public to come and watch. The hockey was great, but unfortunately, there was no reason that the teams had to come up and spend a Saturday, Sunday and play against a group of local kind of all stars, I suppose, right? So that was the Gales. That was in 1978, 79, and 80. And then probably just around the year 2000, a group of the minor hockey guys that had grown into the commercial league decided that they wanted to do it again, and they made an attempt at getting into the Vancouver. Well, it was senior hockey, I guess. It was senior hockey. It was like the Powell River Regals. It was the Vancouver, not Vancouver Giants, but about 16. There were teams from Delta and Squamish and whatnot, and they got into a league, and they were called the Sunshine Coast Sharks. And the 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 unfortunate part of that, and I wasn't playing in that. They asked me if I would coach. Uh, I was coaching kids that I'd had in minor hockey, and there wasn't any of the kids that had actually had any junior experience. So these were just kids that had come through the minor hockey and were playing commercial league, um, playing against guys that had had lots of junior experience, like the Vancouver teams and the Powell River Regals, one of the best senior hockey teams in all of Canada. They've been to the Coy Cup and won the Allen Cup, and so the Sharks were really in over their heads. We didn't have enough local homebrew talent to compete at that level. So it was a hard year. They were in a league, but we spent a lot of time getting spanked, eh? And uh, but it was that next step. We had the Gales. That was kind of an interesting couple of years, and then the Sharks, and you could see that people would come and support it, but we just didn't have the talent. And so now you've got the tsunami. You've got an organization. You've got some owners that are in it for the community. You've got a community that will support it like crazy, because what the heck else is there to do on the Sunshine Coast right in the middle of winter, right? The curlers can go to their curling rink, but everybody likes it. I mean, junior hockey is spectacular. I mean, it is. All the junior hockey that I've been around has been really a positive experience, and the kids on the coast that now don't have to necessarily leave the community to play junior can actually stay and go to Cap College. And I see, Giancarlo, you've got these kids working on online learning and whatnot. So the setup that you guys are presented with these kids is exceptional. It looks like it'll be just a no-brainer, and hopefully for years and years to come, we'll be able to go and watch good junior hockey.
Well, I appreciate it, Jim. And the one thing I can tell you about the Tsunami ownership with Julie Reeves is that this team's here and it's here to stay. And, we wouldn't be here without Julie and a lot of other individuals. But, Jim, before I let you go, I just want to give you one more opportunity to kind of thank the people that you've had the chance to interact with and work with to bring hockey to where it is.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. Now that you bring up Julie, and I said this when Stuart asked me to sort of host and be moderator when we announced that the junior hockey had been. When I started minor hockey and we were starting from scratch, we had I had to go into the community and get organizations to sponsor. Well, the Reeves family, they were one of the first ones. GBS sponsored two teams, one in Sechelt, one in Gibsons. They helped us buy trophies for our year-end, awards for the different leagues, Pee Wee, Bantam, and Midget and whatnot. The sponsor, the people that have stepped up in this community over the years and helped with running minor hockey, we owe them a huge debt of gratitude. And Julie, for sure, the fact that she has offered what she's offered for the kids on the coast here is sensational. But I guess maybe the one thing that I would say was in that very first year when we started. Um, like I was sort of the only hockey person involved, but I had people step forward and want to help. And Ted Dixon, who was a member of the Sechelt Indian Band, he was the education coordinator. He offered to be vice president, as I was elected president. Nobody else wanted to do that. Ted Dixon was the vice president. Bev Modishaw, her husband owned Brian's Auto Body, right where the Petrocan and Sechelt was. It was right there. She was the secretary. Irvens was our very first equipment manager, Bob Ogden was an RCMP officer. He stepped forward and he was our head coach at the beginning. And what else was there? There was one more. I had Jack McLeod was our treasurer. He was an old retired guy, and he kept the books. Right, there's executives, and there's 20 people on them, and we did it with five of us, and we had 400 kids. We did all the scheduling and the ordering of equipment, and we got we got UBC Thunderbirds to come up and host some hockey schools. So we kicked it off. It worked out great. And again, in a small community, I've been saying this for years. This community is absolutely spectacular when it comes to supporting any of these kinds of ventures like this. So you guys are pretty lucky to have a network in this community like you have, and I wish you nothing but the best.
Jim, I appreciate it. Thank you so very much for jumping on with me. I hope you enjoyed this Making Waves podcast. Of course, the first one in the past 2 months by Jim Gray, a great guest on the show. Jim, a pleasure as always. Looking forward to seeing you on Saturday.
You bet. I'm looking forward to it, Giancarlo. Good. Thanks for that.
He's Jim Gray. I'm John Carlo Nadeau. We hope you enjoyed that Making Waves episode. We'll be back with a brand new one next week, and make sure you get your tickets for the 50th anniversary of Hockey on the Coast for this Saturday's contest.